of advice do you have to homeowners?
Practicing that preparedness, starting the conversation now is always going to be a benefit to any association out there.
And welcome to Recovery Report Live. I'm Dan Odess, president of GlobalPro, where we manage risk to recovery, and we have managed more than $1 billion in recovery. We've represented thousands of community associations and business owners in the placement of insurance as well. We are here on our 99th episode. I'm excited to celebrate this milestone as we count down. Well, we only have one more to count to 100. So we hope you join us today and next week as we announce and celebrate the 100th episode of the Recovery Report Live. We're going to continue to produce content with information you can use, and that's what today's show is all about. I can't wait to have on our next guest, Howard, to talk about the science of hurricanes, and what a better topic and a perfect opportunity to talk about it. We're following a disturbance that we just saw right now in the Atlantic Basin. It dissipated, thankfully. It's early, but it's an important time to start to get ready. If you're a business owner or a community association, now's the time to start thinking about these things. But before we get there, I want to talk about the claims process. We've been dealing with a lot of new and different claims. One of the things we're going to be talking about, talking with Howard as well as with hurricanes, is hail. We're dealing with a lot of hail storms, whether in the Texas region as well as in the Illinois area. The Midwest has been getting battered with hailstorms as well as the Texas area. And there's been some confusion with policyholders and when to notice their insurance companies or when to involve a public adjuster in representation. So I wanted to get into a little bit of detail. You have a legal right to representation in most any state in the entire United States. So if you do not hire a licensed public adjuster or an attorney to represent your interests in the claims process, you are unrepresented. Anyone sent out on behalf of the insurance company only represents the interest of the insurance company. Your broker or agent sells you a product. Most often, they're actually paid by your insurance company, not you, or a portion of your premiums is allocated and paid directly to them for their services to broker a deal. They are a middle person between you and the insurance company. They're there to balance a relationship. They're not against you, they're not for you. They're there to work with the market and you to find a fit for you and them and the best deal possible for either and both parties. Most often, however, they are incentivized by the insurance companies as it relates to loss ratios, meaning that if there are less claims or less money paid out and more premium collected, they benefit financially from that. So ask your broker about it. Question them about this relationship that they have with the insurance company and think about this closely. Are they there helping you or helping the insurance company more? If they're incentivized to ensure that there's a better loss ratio that favors the insurance company, is that in your interest or in their interest, the insurance company? I would argue that most often they're there to protect the interest of the insurance company when it comes to claims. When it comes to placing insurance, obviously if they're getting a percentage of whatever you pay for, then their incentive is to sell you more coverage, more insurance, or at a higher price. However, these policies are being gutted of coverage. Now that doesn't mean that they're going out of their way to take advantage of you or whatever else, but I'm sure there are some bad apples out there doing it, but the gross majority of them, like friends of mine and friends of GlobalPro, are probably trying to do the best they can for you as a policyholder. However, in a lot of markets throughout the United States and abroad, the market is tough right now. Most insurance companies are complaining about fraud and claims and this and that, many of which is totally irrelevant to the bottom lines of insurance companies. Although they may argue that, and it may be a sexy argument that they're making at the legislation level, and it's catching a lot of attention, and it's leading to a lot of anti-consumer legislation. The irony, though, is that many of it has nothing to do with the billions and billions of profits that insurance companies are raking in every single year. Even in the worst economic times, insurance companies still find a way to make money. Even when insurance companies lose their license to transact insurance in several states, as they have historically done in Florida and Texas and others, they still figured out a way to make profit. Now, again, that's not to say that your agent or broker are out to get you or do anything else. It's to simply demonstrate that they are not there to protect your interest in the claims process. And quite frankly, it's been difficult to explain to a lot of people that their agent or broker, while they may be their cousin or brother or best friend, they still are there doing business. They're there to make money. And if their interest is in making sure that they make money, at the end of the day, they still have bills to pay, and we're in tough economic times, then maybe their interest in placing or getting you the best insurance at that time to do more work for the same amount of money, or when you have a claim, they want to get more money. it may, depending on their current financial situation, it may incentivize them to act against your interest. So just pay close attention. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to share warning. I'm not trying to be an alarmist. I'm not trying to say everyone's out to get you. I'm not even sure that insurance companies are really out to get you, but they are companies. And many of them are publicly traded and they have shareholders. And what do shareholders want to see a company do? Generate profit and income. They want to see that. They want to see performance. They want to see their companies perform. Well, if the market is in the dumpsters and it's going down and the companies are getting dragged down with it, well, they got to figure out a way to hit their earnings goals when they do their quarterly reporting. And the way to do that is to mitigate their losses. Sometimes there's losses are directly connected to claims. And if those are their only losses, then of course they're going to try to cut the bottom out of that. They're going to change the way in which they reserve, the way in which they underwrite, the way in which they sell you insurance, the way in which they handle your claims. They're not going to act in your best interest in those moments. But that's not to say that, again, the employees of the insurance companies are out to get you. Again, their compensation may be tied to how in which they handle claims or pay claims. And they may be heavily scrutinized by senior executives in the way in which they're doing things. And it may not, again, be in your best interest. But this is, unfortunately, the market we're in. And we have to figure out a way to deal with these things. So look closely, understand the process, and when you're noticing your claim, look closely at your policy as to your requirements in handling and making that notice of that claim and how you, as a policyholder, should report those losses and your duties in the event of a loss. If you don't know what duties in the event of a loss are, or in the event of a loss, your duties are, look at your policy. If you don't have a copy of your policy, obviously go get a copy of your policy. But look for the duties in the event of a loss provision in your policy, print it out, and put it someplace where you can actually access it. And go down through it. Use that as a guide. Use that as a checklist to ensure that you're complying with your obligations under the insurance policy. It's just a checklist. It's the requirements that are bestowed on you or required of you by your insurance company in order to get paid, right? Now, that's part of it. The other part of it is that you obviously need to have coverage under the policy, making sure that there's actually coverage for your claim. And there's many, and a growing number, of causes of loss, or payrolls is the more fancier legal term used to describe these things. So there's many causes of loss, and more so today than ever before, that are excluded. But if you do have coverage, if you don't check off each of those duties in the event of loss, your insurance company may exclude or deny or non-renew your policy in addition to not paying your claim. So it's really important that you understand what those duties in the event of a loss are. So look at that and don't rely on your broker or agent, and certainly do not rely on the insurance company adjuster that's come out there on behalf of the insurance company and not you to adjust the loss to show you or explain to you what those duties are. Go look for them yourself. Start to take responsibility for these things. Don't act clueless, because that does not win the day, particularly when you're dealing with FEMA or flood type losses. Quite frankly, the courts have decided that you should know what's in that policy. You should know what's in your duties in the event of loss. And just saying that the adjuster didn't ask of me to do something like a sworn statement of proof of loss, or didn't ask me to give them certain information or whatever else, the courts have decided that that is not good enough, and that is not going to get you paid nor win the day. So you really need to know, when making a flood claim, what your duties are and what your responsibilities are. And if you don't have a copy of that policy, make sure you check the NFIP website. It's right there, downloadable. Of course, it's on our website. If you can't find it, we can obviously send you the link. Just reach out to our team 24/7, 365. We are here to help policyholders when dealing with either placement of insurance or recovery from loss. That's what we do. That's what the insurance experts at GlobalPro do. 365, 24/7. So we want to make sure that you have the information you can use. That's what it's all about. And I want to get on with the show and invite our guest on. Howard has a breadth of information and knowledge that spans many decades. And without further ado, I want to invite Howard on here. Howard, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Howard is the sole member and founder of the Forensic Weather Consultants, which was founded in 1999. Howard, I hate to say this to you and put you in this position, but that's when I graduated from high school.
Yeah, I know. And, well, yeah, I've been around for a long time. I'll leave it at that. Thanks for having me on the show. I really, really appreciate it. It's great to be here.
No, it's awesome, Howard. No, honestly, I say that only because, as a young person that is trying to find my way at that age, By that point, you and I offline had a conversation about some of the things I experienced from Hurricane Andrew, which we're up on that anniversary of, which is shocking, which is one of the most devastating storms in Florida history for sure. Something that to this day is celebrated in a way because it changed so much, let me say a better way, is remembered for so many things. So many changes in the building code, so many changes in the way that insurance is sold, and so many changes are made in the claims process. For good or worse, it did make a lot of change, but it was a big milestone in my life. My family just moved from, we're moving from South Florida to Pennsylvania. And before we actually got on that plane and moved up to Pennsylvania, we experienced Hurricane Andrew and then landed in Pennsylvania. And then experienced one of the worst winter storms in the history of Pittsburgh. So I got it on both ends as a youngster. And now,
your business is thriving. No wonder your business, everywhere you go, there's weather disasters.
Exactly, it's following me. But I think it's with a lot of things like construction and insurance and weather, it's all about history, right? It's about experience. And then using those data points to help make better decisions or informed decisions down the road. So I think because of your experience in the industry and the length of time that you've been in it, you've seen so much, and it's awesome to have you on. So I want to talk a little bit about forensic weather consultants, FWC. See you there on your hat and on your shirt. Great branding, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. So tell us about the clients. Tell us about the focus of the company. And how did you get started?
So I'm a former TV meteorologist. I worked for NBC for about 9 years. And, I was a weather watcher for Al Roker when he had hair. And that tells you how long ago I was doing this. Grew up in New Jersey, but ultimately working at the NBC TV affiliate in Albany, New York. I started doing some forensic weather on the side, having learned a little bit about the business. That was in 1999 when I started my company. And we've grown from working on one case every 3 to 4 months at that point in 1999 to about, I think we're closing in about 650 cases a year right now. And we've done over 7,000 insurance claims and lawsuits all across the country, from terrorist attacks to billion-dollar claims and small roof claims. We have a team of meteorologists here. Besides myself, I have 4 other full-time forensic meteorologists that work with me on our insurance claims and weather-related lawsuits. And we do this all over the country and all over the world for hail claims, hurricanes, slip and falls on snow and ice, homicide trials. I testified in 3 of those, everything and anything in between. It's really a fascinating job, and it's so interesting to work with people like you and attorneys and insurance carriers. Whichever side that we end up having been retained on, it doesn't really matter. We just tell what the weather was and try and solve the puzzle, like playing weather detective. It's really exciting.
Yeah, and it's everyone loves their their weather channel and the drama that plays out on TV. But firsthand, we've all seen the videos of that weatherman with the mic in his hand and then holding onto a tree, and then some dude walking his dog behind him. It's so
That's
so.
right.
So I assume what you do is a bit different than what we see that plays out on TV.
Yeah, we don't do any acting. We just tell it the way it is. People love us because we tell it the way it is, plain English. We don't sensationalize anything. It is what it is. And if you think someone thinks that there's big hail and we find that there wasn't, we're going to tell you. There wasn't any hail. There was a mile and a half away, but at this property there wasn't. But what you're talking about, I remember the lady on the Today Show rowing through the floodwaters in a canoe, and then all of a sudden they pan out and some guy's walking through the water with water up to his shins. It's like, the media gets a bad rap, but for a good reason sometimes.
Yeah, no, and again, I think they've tried to improve upon that and not to be alarmist. I think unfortunately sometimes the alarmist behavior, if that's even a terminology, whatever else. But it's good for clickbait and it sells advertisement. So
Exactly.
sometimes that's their incentive. We talked. I mentioned earlier in the broadcast about what incentivizes people to act in a certain way, and unfortunately, I think sometimes it incentivizes to media to dramatize the situation. But that unfortunately can create a life-threatening situation, more so than even the weather itself. Maybe sometimes people panic, right? You don't want that panic, right? You want to make sure you're getting information that you can actually use, and really that's what this is all about, and bringing on people like you who have some real experience and can share with us their thoughts and feelings and opinions on these things. And by the way, we don't always agree, right? So and as we noted in the earlier broadcast, we may even sit on the opposite sides of the table, but the reality of it is that it is science. It's not perfect, and these are through certain analysis, certain conclusions can be made and can be helpful, can be hurtful. But either way, it is what it is, and and we have a certain methodology for doing it, and you have a certain role within a process. So let's just get a little bit about the topic here, right? The science of hurricanes. Now, while it is about hurricanes, there are other things that are going on right now that are impacting our country or the nation right now on a weather basis. Obviously, there's an economic issue going on. Well, let's focus on weather. It's less politically driven, and to me, it's right now I think is a little bit more less dramatic than, let's say, some of the opinions that from the pundits regarding the issues in the economy. But the issues in the economy are directly impacting the ability of people to recover, the cost of recovery, and issues like that. So, and really the science of hurricanes, and the reason why I think it's an important topic is it goes to proving whether or not your property has sustained damage, and to the extent that weather event can in fact cause that damage. And recently we saw a disturbance in Atlanta. I mentioned it earlier in the broadcast. And is this an indication, because by some it may be, an indication of a busier upcoming season?
So I'm glancing at our weather maps right now, and again, I don't watch the Weather Channel. I look at the raw data myself, get my own opinion. So I'm looking at the satellite imagery in the Western Atlantic. There's that disturbance right now. Doesn't look like it's going to be very much. The computer models don't think it's going to develop into anything. It's off of Savannah, Georgia right now. Some of the other computer models in about 10 days forecast another tropical system potentially down by Cuba coming into the Gulf. But that's still pretty far out, still pretty early in the season. It's not uncommon for something to form, but there's very few computer models that are forecasting any tropical development over the next 2-3 weeks. So I see it, but I'm a little skeptical. Doesn't mean it can't happen. However, in the big picture, Dan, we are in a La Nina pattern, right? And that means that the waters in the tropical Pacific by the equator are much colder than normal. And I just read a new release this morning about La Nina, where NOAA is forecasting La Nina to continue through the first part of the summer and weaken a little bit. What that means is the weather patterns kind of shift so that there are abnormal flows aloft. And what that does is actually create a better opportunity for tropical systems and hurricanes to form in the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. So I would think, and I agree with NOAA, that it should be an above normal hurricane season. It should be busier than normal for the United States and the Gulf and the Atlantic and the Caribbean. Now, it only takes, this is what we always say, it only takes one hurricane like Irma or Andrew or Sandy to cause devastation and huge economic and losses and structural issues. So it doesn't say much. None of them could hit the United States, but it's going to be an above normal active hurricane season, I think.
So you touched on something, which is it takes one, right? So, and something I wanted to talk about with you is some of the misconceptions or how people misinterpret some of these predictions. And I think you just noted one, which is that because we're expecting a higher than average busy storm season, does that mean we're going to have more hurricanes that cause damage? Do you see that as an often misunderstanding or misconception by a lot of the general public?
I do, because if it's going to be a below normal hurricane season, people let their guard down a little bit. They say, oh, it's going to be an easy hurricane season, not a big deal. And then you have something like Irma comes along or Andrew comes along. And it could be one of the worst, hurricane disasters in history, potentially. And we just don't know from a forecast standpoint. Those are all based on statistics. But as you know, records can be broken, statistics can be wrong. It doesn't take a lot. So it's just a probability forecast right now. So far, my forecasts for the past 4 or 5 years have been pretty accurate and spot on in terms of above normal hurricane activity. But I mean, when people say, "Oh, look out for Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina," they're going to get hammered on August 10th by a hurricane right now. That's ridiculous. That's very not even a little. It's very irresponsible, and you cannot predict with that kind of accuracy what's going to happen. Even 5 days out, 7 days out, with hurricanes is difficult because they all have a mind of their own.
Yeah, I mean, I like that word, irresponsible. And it was kind of when we were talking about a little drama with, some of the news broadcasting that we've seen in the past where, when we talked about, the woman rowing, something that, just over dramatizing stuff and is definitely irresponsible. And I think that you noted, another way which could be irresponsible, which is, the idea that someone can actually tell you that on a certain date there's going to be landfall of a hurricane when you and I have both seen, obviously both of us are probably pegged to our computers and looking at the data like nonstop when one is threatening, but over a 5-day period, even if you're in that cone, I mean, that could just mean any possible number of possibilities or outcomes. And you can see the disagreements in models sometimes, even within a 5-day period, is like massive. And many of the models may even fall outside of the cone. And depending on whose actually cone you're looking at too, can mean a lot because some of them like totally discredit some of the models. They're like, oh, we don't look at the European model. We look at this model. We don't look at that one. So I definitely agree. I gotta agree with you on a lot on the irresponsibility. And you do bring up a good thing, and something for our audience to think about is that if you are reading reports that are saying that X amount of storms are going to make landfall or a particular area is going to be impacted more than not, and they're talking about it today, you probably need to find a new source for information. Is it likely that they're dramatizing it for a reason, whether it's clickbait or some other incentive, and just be careful what you're doing. And I always tell people understand your data information a little bit more, get to understand where they're getting it from, and ask questions. I mean, most websites, have a FAQ area or a contact information and a lot of people will give you some feedback. I've done it with, tornado and hail predictions and stuff like that. And I've asked some of these people, that chase after these storms, what do you think or how you look at it? And then I compare their answer to others. And it's interesting, and it's obviously part of our business being in the risk management to understand these things, and certainly in your industry as a meteorologist, you need to know this stuff. So you talked about your data and what you're looking at. So let's talk about the technology behind some of this stuff and how the technology has better helped us understand the science of storms in general. And we mentioned hail before as well as hurricane, and I know the title here is The Science of Hurricanes, but the science is just not only for hurricanes, right? There's a science in all of these weather patterns. So how has technology helped us better understand these storms, and how are you used it as a meteorologist?
One of the biggest issues we see with insurance claims are, some attorneys, insurance carriers, they use some different vendor automated hail reports, for instance. And each automated vendor hail reports, and I won't get into any names. I mean, we have our own automated one, which is just strictly based on NOAA, but other people have proprietary algorithms. One of them, which is quite popular, is run by a former roofer, not even any meteorology education or background. Another one's by a risk management company, which I think does happens to have horrible reliability in their hail products. Yeah. But professionals are using these automated reports, which all say different types of hail sizes. One says no hail, another one says 3 golf ball size hail on the same exact day, or they just look at a NOAA report, say like 3 miles away, and assume it affected the property or it didn't affect the property. It's just not good enough. And what we do with the technology we have is look at the raw Doppler radar images and the storm reports and research and science and proven methodologies that, that are accepted in the meteorological community. And we use those to zoom right in over a property and figure out what was going on. So if you had a warehouse where you have a hail claim, for instance, in Orlando, it doesn't really matter that there was a hail report of golf ball sized hail, 7 miles away, because that may not have even gone over the property. So what we do is plot the property that you're interested in, for instance, right on the Doppler radar images, and then we have different radar products like differential reflectivity, correlation coefficient. We look at the radar from the ground up to 50,000 feet, see if there is an indication of a hail core in there, which is like the bright red you see on the weather radar on TV. We can look at that three-dimensionally, vertically. And there's research that shows the presence of hail in a thunderstorm. Using all of that, again, right over the incident location, we can see if a hail core and a downburst, moved every minute and went over the property or not. 7 miles away is really irrelevant. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is professionals on all sides still rely on these NOAA reports to make assumptions. And when you're dealing with a $1 million condominium claim, those assumptions, I can't tell you how many times, are wrong. And it's completely opposite of what somebody was thinking actually occurred. So that's why we're getting so busy with that, especially the hailstorms and the wind cases, because people are finding value in what we do, and we're able to tell exactly what happened at the property based on reliable principles and scientific data.
No, it makes sense. And in a 2019 article that was published in the Property Casualty 360, and I'm going to quote you here. It says, the insurance industry has still not embraced the use of experienced meteorologists and technology when researching weather-related losses. Until this happens, many claims will continue to be paid unnecessarily. Now, obviously, and based on your commentary, you can kind of almost flip the statement around, right? You can almost say that some claims will not get paid unnecessarily as well. So is this true? This article's in 2019. And there's been major leaps in technology, and particularly since the pandemic, where people went remote and relied more on technology than ever before, and you saw this massive amount of money pouring into a new area, which is called InsurTech, which only has been a couple years old here now, that's been given a proper title. Is this true today?
Absolutely. We see it every day, as a matter of fact, where we might get retained by the plaintiff's attorney for a lawsuit, and then 10 minutes later we get a different case for an insurance carrier, and they may have an understanding based on some weather data that somebody non-meteorologist looked at, or even maybe a meteorologist that doesn't have experience in this area doesn't know what to look for, and it very often is completely different. And you're an engineer, right? You have an engineering background. And we are now getting so much work from engineering firms that only used to rely on, the NOAA hail report or something, or one of these vendor hail reports, because they see the value in what we're doing at the specific property that they're working on. So they retain us directly and then take our data and then plug it into their engineering reports with terminal velocity, proving that hail did occur or didn't occur, whether it's for the insurance carrier or for the plaintiff's attorney. Knowledge is power, right? We've all heard that for decades and stuff, and it's especially true now because the evidence and the data and the reports that we write is proving a case, whether it's for the insurance carrier or the plaintiff's attorney, doesn't really matter. We'll tell it the way it is. If there's no hail and you thought there was hail, we're going to call you and tell you that. But they're proving cases either right or wrong and telling it the way it is, and that's helping. Going to your point about the insurance industry hasn't really adopted to this. That's because they're still using a NOAA report from a few miles away from a loss, or an automated hail report, or an automated winds report from one of the vendors. I remember doing a tornado case in Rowlett, Texas, and one of the vendor wind reports, it's like an automated wind report, you probably know what I'm talking about, they said the highest wind was 44 miles an hour at this property. It's a $39 report. And we were retained on that, and not only was that wrong, but the National Weather Service survey had that property within the EF3 confirmed wind rating of a tornado. So the automated report showed 44 miles an hour, but in reality it was actually at least EF3, which is way higher, more than double 44 miles an hour.
Wow.
So a lot of that is still a problem today, unfortunately. But we're sorting it out, right? When people call us, now you get the real deal. You know exactly what's going on within a reasonable degree of certainty, and based on this advanced radar imagery and storm surge measurement tools and buoy data and reconnaissance information, all that stuff.
No, and I try to explain this to people all the time. It's like I went through engineering school as an undergrad, and I started a master's in engineering, and it's science, right? And one of the things we always calculated whenever we're trying to give a certain conclusion in engineering school, and what a lot of people don't appreciate is when you are in engineering school, our test that could take 2 hours is usually one question, maybe 2 questions, and we have to actually explain the outcome of our calculations because there is always some variance or error and some assumptions that were made, and we have to explain those assumptions and give a basis for that. Now, when you look at a report from NOAA or one of these other, a lot of people don't take the time to read the assumptions, right? And understand what led to those certain conclusions. And a lot of times those assumptions or the context for which the statistics were given may be wrong or not applicable to a certain location or condition that was noted at a property, whatever else. And so, but again, most people don't have the benefit of having that sort of education, which I know having gone through meteorology school and then in real life as a meteorologist, you certainly understand what I'm saying. And basically all I'm trying to do is simply echo your comment and how difficult. And this is the science of hurricanes. This is what we're talking about. This is the science of storms in general. And this is applicable across the board, is that there are assumptions that are made, there are explanations to these things, there's a basis, there's a context for how these things are presented or provided, and without understanding that or having the full context of someone is drawing these conclusions or why or how they're doing it, I think a lot is missed. And on the topic of technology, I think it's getting better. But in a lot of ways, maybe that's not for the better, though. It may be, again, there may be other things built into the modeling that may not serve, the interest of whoever it is trying to collect that information. So you definitely don't understand your source, where you're getting it. It's just like a newsreel, right? You got to understand where they're getting it, where they're coming from with it, what their expertise are. Like you mentioned, a roofer that suddenly is issuing hail reports. Maybe not the greatest source of information, right? But it's not to say that they're wrong either. But they may be more wrong than right, or in this particular matter, on that particular type of storm or that issue, they may be wrong. So, maybe it's good enough for some things, but not for other things. Who knows, all right? But there is a big issue with adoption with regards to insurance companies and technology that I have noted. Having an insured tech company, Griffin Data Services, that we are launching a product really heavily focused on consumers. And what we've seen in the industry is a lack of adoption by insurance companies. And it's being reported by insured tech companies that have received billions of dollars. That insurance companies are not buying their products, even though they're getting these massive valuations. And it's unfortunate. I'm not going to make any sort of make any sort of opinions regarding whether that's investments and stuff like that, but it's mostly on the claim side and underwriting that we're I apologize, correction my statement. It's mostly on the underwriting side and not the claim side that we're seeing these investments. And the claim side, and part of our conversation here is this, right? Why aren't there investments being made there? But that all aside, do you see things changing? Do you see things improving? You are involved in so many claims. Do you see the use of technology improving the claims process?
I do, and I think we're seeing that already. And not only is the data there, but I think insurance carriers, plaintiffs' attorneys, engineering firms, public adjusters, they're all seeing the value in how we leverage that technology to help prove what was going on or what was not going on. And it's solving real world problems. So we're continuing to see developments in the technology, but a lot of that technology has been there for 5 or 10 years. But just people outside the meteorology community, but still in the insurance claims business, aren't aware or haven't really fully grasped how valuable that kind of information is, because they're used to the old way. But once they start seeing how this technology can be used by certified consulting meteorologists and forensic meteorologists, they're blown away. And we're getting more and more leverage and people understanding why that's important. So I think as technology improves, it'll even get better, but it already is fantastic to the point where we can really tell what was going on at a specific property.
So walk us through a little bit about, we're talking a lot about data, talking a lot about technology. Walk us through, just in generally speaking, how you're actually able to pinpoint the conditions on a property.
Okay, so let me give you an example. We had a case in the Midwest, $800,000 roof claim at a church, right? And there was a meteorologist, actually a certified consulting meteorologist on the other side. And I was working for the insurance carrier on this one, incidentally, and they claimed that there was, let's just say 1.25 inch hail that affected the property. And that was based on a NOAA storm report, right? A local storm report that you see from NOAA. You go to the storm events database or NOAA and you see a hail report at this latitude and longitude. And they based their whole opinion on that, and they used a radar product that wasn't as advanced. It was more of a generic radar product. When we got hired by the insurance carrier, who did not see any damage on the roof, I pulled the Doppler radar imagery and I plotted that church location right on the radar images, which were taken every 1 to 2 minutes. So we saw how the storm moved along. It looked like a light shower to me on radar, and this was using the most advanced technology. So something wasn't right to me. Like, why are they saying there's 1.25 inch hail at this property when there's like just a light shower, no indication of hail? So we made some phone calls, didn't make any sense, looked at all the data, called the National Weather Service, and it turned out that the contractor at NOAA, at the National Centers for Environmental Information, the contractor plotted the wrong latitude and longitude for that hail report. It was actually 26 miles away from where it was reported in all the NOAA documentation. And the meteorologist never caught on to it. The engineer who relied on the meteorologist never caught on to it. And ultimately, they had to dismiss the claim because they had zero proof after we were able to show that there was no hail, that it was a wrong observation. They had to dismiss the claim, and it was just thrown out. So they dropped it, but that's how you use that kind of data. You can't just rely on a storm report, you see, because that's $800,000, whether it's for the plaintiff side or for the insurance carrier side. It was based on bad data. But when you have somebody actually thinking about it, looking at the data, looking at the technology and saying, wait a minute, an aha moment, that doesn't make sense, that's where the value comes into what we do, much more so than, say, an automated hail report, which was also based on that wrong data. So $800,000, that's a lot of money, right? So for a $1,000 or $1,500 investment, that's a pretty good return on your investment, regardless of which side you're on. I mean, it could go the other way too, but that's just an example. We see that almost every day, that kind of thing, where somebody thought there was really big hail and there wasn't. You're in Florida, you could have a tornado affect one area, or hail affect Coral Springs, for instance, and then a mile away it didn't even rain because the thunderstorm pops up, drops hail, downburst occurs, and then it dissipates 25 minutes later. So we can see what's happening, but if you just look at a NOAA report, you might be very misinformed or assumptions made that aren't realistic.
Well, yeah, I mean, after the last, let's say, the major storm that impacted most of the South Florida region, right, where we're headquartered, Hurricane Irma, right, 2017. Yeah. We had an insurance company actually take the position that there wasn't even a hurricane in South Florida, right? Irma did not affect South Florida at all. And the irony, though, is that this one insurance company insured two buildings right next to each other. And in one building, the balconies came off. There was all this interior water damage, everything else. The neighboring building, they didn't lose any balconies. It was a bit of a newer building. Had a lot of interior damage. Had windows that didn't operate. Had a couple broken panes of window. And the one claim, they alleged that there was no hurricane. No hurricane. They hired a meteorologist. The guy wrote a report, said there was no hurricane. The pressure, the winds, nothing. The other one, they wrote an estimate for damages. And actually stood behind it and didn't hire a meteorologist, but just went and said it was below deductible. So it resulted in a zero. However, they did acknowledge hurricane damages. What I found interesting about it was on the one which they wanted to prove that there were no hurricane damages, they actually hired a meteorologist who opined that there wasn't even a hurricane in South Florida. Now, it wasn't, and by the way, his analysis was not specific to the location, and that's what we caught on to, is that his analysis was South Florida didn't get impacted by a hurricane or Hurricane Irma, and therefore none of the damages could be associated with a hurricane. It had nothing really to do with a site-specific evaluation. And then we just come to find out, obviously, right next door, they actually wrote an estimate for damages, but ironically, it was, no surprise, it was below the deductible. Again, however, we were able to use both cases, in working together in conjunction to disprove the position of the insurance company, resulted in a multi-million-dollar recovery for both associations. However, it's just to say, again, I think to your point, as you made a comment about, misreporting of information and how it may be used, two good examples. One where an insurance company, did a proper valuation and found out and investigated damages and realized that, that there was an issue with the data and information and there was no coverage and there was no storm. And on the other side, you have a situation where a meteorologist gets involved and again, the context in which one was provided, the context in which the information was provided and what they were relying on, and to your point, they were using data and information from an airport more than 15 miles from that location. And it's a point I've made in a prior broadcast, and I want to get your opinion on it. A lot of the weather data that you do see used by NOAA and some of these other reporting systems are coming from your local airports. Is there a reason for that? And how important is that to evaluating the conditions at your property?
So the weather data from the airport, they're typically called ASOS, Weather Station Automated Surface Observing Systems, and they're there as part of a agreement between the Department of the Defense and the FAA for commercial air traffic. And really, they're to let pilots know what the weather conditions are for planes that are landing and taking off. So they report very frequently, but they're pretty far distanced apart, right? You have Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, you have Tamiami, you have Miami International, North Perry Airport, and other places. They're much further spread apart than that. So they play a role, but like with Irma, for instance, we have citizen weather observer stations, we have other types of mesonet stations. There's literally, hundreds and hundreds of wind reports from different weather stations in Florida during Irma that we've leveraged. Hundreds of observations. And some of those are closer to the incident location. We extrapolate between different weather locations, different weather stations. We look at Doppler radar to see if there was maybe a landfalling spin-up hurricane, or tornado rather, on the right front quadrant, which are quite common, and there were tornadoes. But those are very short-lived. They won't get picked up by the airport weather stations usually, but we'll see them on Doppler radar. And we can sometimes see if there's even debris being lofted into the air on Doppler radar. We can tell a lot of the time. So using all of that information, you might get an airport that goes offline, right? Gets knocked out, and you have no data. And we've seen that. And then, one case where, the winds weren't any higher than 54 miles an hour. That's because it got knocked offline, and the engineer didn't know that. But we corrected him, and told him the way it really was. But the interesting thing about your example with the hurricane in South Florida, and this is where we come in from having so much experience, somebody would say, or another meteorologist would say, well, there wasn't a hurricane in Fort Lauderdale. Okay, well, that's because the sustained winds weren't 74 miles an hour or higher, which is the definition of a hurricane, right? But the wind gusts were maybe 80, 90, 95 miles an hour, which can still cause a lot of damage. So technically, are they correct? Maybe that hurricane conditions were not met by definition in some places, but it doesn't mean that 90 to 100 mile an hour winds didn't occur in gusts, which, I'm not going to opine whether a specific property had damage or not, but I know damage can occur when you have 90 to 100 mile an hour winds in some places. So, sometimes there's a lot of trickery that goes on in some of the reports you see, and it's up to us and you and other people to recognize that and play devil's advocate and be like, wait a minute, they're not telling the whole story. And that's a lot of the value from this as well.
Yeah, and that was part of it. Was just like, wait, how is this even possible? And what does he mean by the hurricane? As I expected, you did a great job of explaining how it could be possibly true. What he's saying in part makes sense, but at the same time, they're not accounting for those bursts and the tornadoes and the other types of activities and the flying debris. I was reading in that article from 2019, you were talking about how, part of the new Doppler system is to rule out, mosquito swarms and birds and things like that. Yep. That's how detailed some of the stuff can get. So, for our listeners that are listening to this stuff, they can see, stuff that is like flying debris and other things that may be contained within these storms. Again, it's not foolproof. There's a measure of error that goes in. There's certain assumptions that are made. That's what this modeling is for. That's why you have so many different models for storms, and then they take some sort of statistical analysis or aggregate of those those assumptions made by each of those models that use certain different algorithms to finding the direction and path. And sometimes you see those models that go up and around and around and around and out and in, and again, as they're trying to predict the next 5, 10 or more days of what's going to happen with a certain storm that's moving through, whether it's hail, whether it's hurricane. This has been an amazing conversation. It's been great to have you on, Howard. I really am grateful that you took the time to do this. We're definitely going to have you on as we head into storm season again to keep talking about these important things, because I don't think there's been enough attention given. And we said this offline. It's like we may not always agree, and there may be differences in the conclusions we may come to. That's the beauty of what we do. And unfortunately, it's just the science of this industry, and in trying to research these things, and there's assumptions that are made. But again, we're going to get better with it. The more adoption with technology, it definitely can be helpful. Unfortunately, though, sometimes the technology is not used in the best way or properly used at all. And I think having more conversations like this, being open about some of the assumptions and our experiences, will lead to a better process for consumers. And right now, as I've mentioned on prior broadcasts, we have a growing amount of dissatisfaction among insureds that are dealing with claims specifically. It's at a faster rate than they've ever seen before. There's a higher dissatisfaction rate right now amongst policyholders with regards to claims than we've ever seen before. And it's ironic because of the amount of investment in InsurTech. But if you do a little deep dive into InsurTech, you start to realize a lot of that is going towards the underwriting process and not so much on the claim side of things. So hopefully we have more conversations like this. We have great people on like you to talk about these important issues, and maybe it'll get someone's attention. I don't know. But how can our audience find out more about FWC, or Forensic Weather Consultants?
So we have a great webpage called weatherconsultants.com, or they can call us at 518-862-1800, or email us at admin@weatherconsultants.com. You can find us on the webpage. You can find us, any of those locations. And we're happy to talk to you about any claims or cases or anything that we may be able to assist with. And there's a lot of different types of cases and claims or conversations like we're having. I love having them. I love teaching about this stuff. I love being on shows like this. So I'd love to do it again, whether it's the same topic or a different topic, or maybe a hurricane or a big hailstorm that happens somewhere. We could dive down deep and show you some cool graphics and show you some examples. But they can go to our website, weatherconsultants.com.
No, absolutely. I visited the website. It's a great website. It's got a lot of information about his team, about Howard himself, and and like I did, Google him. You'll check out a lot of articles as he's participated in a lot of things out there. He's got a lot of experience in the meteorology world. Howard, really great to have you on. Thank you so much for being with us here today, and we'll definitely have you back on the Recovery Report for sure.
It's my pleasure. It was really fun, and thank you very much for inviting me.
All right, well, that's it from Howard and our team here at GlobalPro. We're very excited to obviously be celebrating our 100th episode. That's what's coming up next week right here on the Recovery Report Live. We are in our 99th year. We had a great conversation with Howard. As he mentioned, there are areas of disturbance out there. What does it mean? It's anyone's guess. I think right now, but the prediction is obviously a very active hurricane season. So we wanted to start the conversation early. We always want to encourage you all to practice preparedness, be ready. You never know what to expect, so you always have to plan for the what if, and having conversations with people like Howard and other industry experts out there to get their opinions about how to interpret this stuff, or how they would interpret this stuff, and how this information can be used to either help you through the process and make more informed decisions, is what we think is important for obviously for our clients as well as for the industry. There needs to be more conversation around policyholders and an investment in the claims experience. And unfortunately right now we're not seeing that investment by insurance companies. And if you think that you are, as an insurance company, the statistics say otherwise. They're actually reporting dissatisfaction. So we hope the process does improve. We hope that we continue to shed light on some of the issues in the industry and talk about some of the solutions. That's what this is all about. I'm solution minded. That's what I have been for the good better part of over 10 years of experience in the claims industry. Here at GlobalPro, we are celebrating our 10th year anniversary. As many of you know, we continue to celebrate it to talk about all the great things that we have done for not only our community, but for our policyholders in general. We are going to continue to advocate. We want to continue providing you information you can use. And the best way for you to keep up to date on that information is to like us and follow us and subscribe to all of our social media and YouTube channels, and to make sure that you get those notifications when we go live right here in the Griffin Studio. And we'll be right here next week at the Griffin Studio to broadcast our 100th episode of the Recovery Report Live. And I'm gonna have on a special guest, someone that's been with me from day one here at GlobalPro, to talk all about the last 10 years, about the 100th episode, and about what we think you should expect here in this year of 2022 in this storm season. We want to make sure that you have the information you use, so like us, follow us on all the social media, and hit that subscribe button. We want to make sure you're getting those notifications, right? So if you need something, reach out, contact us 24/7, 365. That's what the insurance experts at GlobalPro are here for. They want to make sure that you have insurance information. We want to make sure that you're making planned, informed decisions when you're preparing for the upcoming storm season. So again, see you next week, same place, same time on the Recovery Report Live.